Hello, Mitesh again here. Thanks for joining. This is part 4, and in this section we'll look at how do we, now we've got our code, we understand the code, now we want to deploy it from Azure DevOps. So we'll take a look at all the steps, the permissions, service accounts, and I'll give you a demo on that as well. So we'll look at the Azure DevOps Service connection. So how do we connect to Azure from DevOps? Because we're not using Visual Studio Code, we're not doing an interactive login with our username and password. So we need to set up something called a service principal, automatic creation versus manual. We'll look at the creation of access policies for that service principal, and then we'll go on to look at release pipelines and how we set those up, look at staging, tasks, also the precedence and things like continuous deployment. We'll see that in action. How do we add approvals, and also overwriting parameters from our parameter files. So let's take a quick look at the environment. So this is the training user account. So it's got limited access. It's got limited access to this subscription here. You can only see these resource groups. So if we look at the permissions on the resource group, we'll see that they have been given contributor access via a group. So they're in this group here, and they've just got contributor access to that subscription, this resource group only. Okay. Azure DevOps. So if we log into there, we can look at our project. So this is the top level, the organization. Underneath organization, we have a project. So we're looking there. And then if we go to project settings, we look at something called service connections here. So this is how we connect to our Azure environment, because remember, we're not doing it interactively through Visual Studio Code. So it's not going to get a pop-up when we put our username and password in. So we need to create something called service principal in Azure. And in order to do that, we need to use an account that's called admin access. So let's do that to get us started off. So I'm going to log into my admin account here. So this is under my own account here. And I can open the project, go to project settings, look at service connections, create service connection, what type of thing are we deploying. So we can deploy to many different destinations. In our case, we're going to deploy to Azure Resource Manager. Click on that. And I'll show you the automatic way first, and then I'll show you the manual way as well. So the managed identity is one for when you're using your own self-hosted build server. So in this case, we're just going to use the Azure build servers internally, the free ones. So if we do the automatic one there, well, we can do it at the different levels. So we'll pick the subscription level here. Just pause it while this loads. Okay, so I've selected the subscription in that one, and then in here, let's have a look at our training one. Let's say our dev training resource group here, and let's give it a name. So we'll call it, give it a name, training, so SVC connection, for example. We can even call it DevOps, so we know where we created it. And then give it a description if you want, and then click Save. And that will then go and create this service principal in our Azure Active Directory, which we'll take a look at now. Flip back to our training user account, and we can just refresh this connection, or just re-click it, and we'll be able to see it there now. Our training user can see this service principal. So if we go into resource groups here that we can see, we can go into here and see that permission as well, that is gone and created for us automatically, and the actual object. So if we look at role assignments in here, we'll be able to see here's created this, see this resource, the training. So it creates this big long GUID and the name of our organization and the name of the project in this case. If we look at prod, and you'll see it's not actually created it in here because we specified the dev resource group, okay? And if we want to also just check in Azure AD, this is where we can find it, app registrations, go into here, start typing our training, and we can see that that's the actual object in here that's been created. Now if you want to deploy to So if we want to deploy to dev, we need to go and grant this object access to our dev resource group as well. So what we'll do next is we'll look at creating it manually as well. So we can, kind of create the name that we want and grant it the right level of permissions on the resource groups that we want. So what we could do is, if I go back to my admin account, my account there, we can just go and delete this one. Okay, so one of the things about creating an automated one is that it will go and clean up that service principal in our Azure AD. We go into there. Now let's go back to our test machine. Yeah, it's now deleted. Okay, and then if we go back to our dev and prod, we can have a look inside there, and we can see it's tidied up that permission for us for that service principal. So what we can do next, we'll do it via code using Visual Studio Code, and we'll create our own service principal and assign that access in DevOps. So we'll just switch to that. Okay, we're now in Visual Studio Code. We're using a global admin account here to make sure we can create our service principal. We've connected with the Connect AZ account. I've already saved these variables, including my subscription ID. I'm just going to run these again. Normally you just get the password from Key Vault, but just for this demo, I'm just going to hard code it into there. So this is the job that actually creates the Key Vault, and you can, the service principal, and you can see the name that we've chosen is one that we want to use ourselves rather than letting the system choose it for us. We can do that for now. We need to get the application ID, so that's just a property of that service principal, and we're going to just save that because we're going to refer to it later. So let's just save that. I'll just save that in a different screen. And then what we need to do is grant it access. So just like we saw previously with the automatic one, it granted access to a resource group. What we're going to do here is grant it to our own resource groups here, production and development in this case. Okay, what we can also need to do is grant it access to Key Vault, and we'll check our Key Vault now. We'll do that in the GUI so I can just show you some of the things that we can check. So if we go back to our dev environment here, go to our dev Key Vault, go to access policies and click on add. Let's see what do we want to grant access to. Let's say secret management. What do we want to do? We can just select specific actions here. Let's just do get and list for now. Okay, get and list. Who do we want to grant access to? So we're going to give access to our DevOps service principal, which is this guy here, training 2. So this is the principal that just got created with that previous script. Okay, so we'll grant access there, select that, and don't forget to hit save there, it's easily forgotten. And also make sure the Azure Resource Manager for template deployments is selected because we're deploying our own templates. So now if we look at the resource groups, we should see our access settings here. Access control, yeah. Service principal exists and it's got access here using the scope of this resource group. And if we just go back home, we should check our production resource group, and that again should have the same level of access. Yep, so it's granted the permissions there for us. So now let's look at the service principal that we just created here. Let's have a look at that in DevOps now as well. So if we go back to our DevOps, still Ultimate Training User, if I just refresh that screen, this is where we can now create that service connection. So because we've created it with our admin account, we can then just create it, select the manual option in here. So we're going to do service principal manual, and we deploy into the Azure cloud. We do it at the subscription level, and we're just going to paste in some of our values here. So we just filled in all these values here. So subscription ID, the name, and the application ID or the service principal ID that we just took earlier from the PowerShell, our password, and there's a tenant ID here as well. So if you don't know your tenant ID, just look in your Azure Active Directory. On the home screen, you should see it there. If not, look at the properties of that object. So this is a good way to provide, say, your developers or user teams who are deploying access to specific things without them themselves needing global admin and without granting too many access privileges. So we could verify that now, and it should go and succeed. So it's going to check, has it got any permissions, and can it see this service principal, is the password correct, and yes, it is. Okay, so we need to give it a name. So we're just going to, it's got DevOps Training 1. So this is the name that's going to be referred to in our DevOps project. So we just got a Training 2 actually, and we'll save that. So now we've got our service principal that we can use now. So it's a manual one. So remember, if we delete it from here, we need to go and delete it from our resource groups. Otherwise, you'll just get like an orphaned resource assignment in there. I'll just say object can't be identified. So we just need to remove those entries, and then we need to remove this application ID from our Azure AD. Okay, so now we've got our service principal, we're ready to, so we've got some credentials basically, we'll be able to use that in one of our pipelines. So if we look at a release pipeline here, so there's two types, there's a build pipeline and a release pipeline. So we're not going to use build pipelines today, because that's usually, you see a lot of demos where they're deploying packages. So you may be deploying a web app and then deploying a code package into that web app and various other things. But in order to just deploy some simple infrastructure, we can just go ahead and use a release pipeline. So we'll do that in this demo. And this is kind of generally how I do it. I'm just going to close this for now and say what our artifact is. So this is, where is our code? What are we going to actually deploy? So if we click on that and just specify our project, which is Training 2, what is the source? We're going to connect Azure repos. So that's where our code is, remember. We've got Training 2 and our Training 2 source code repo. The branch, we'll just stick to our main branch. We're not doing any branching, and just leave the rest as defaults. And then what we're going to do is just look at this. When do we want it to deploy? So we can just manually kick this build off what we're going to define. And what we can do is, if we set this continuous deployment trigger here, it means every time we make a change to our code and commit it, so we do a push, then it's going to kick off this build for us, or kick off a release. So let's just do that to start with. And then we need to add a stage. So if we just click a stage, so this is saying, when do we want to run this part and where is our code? We can also do it via schedule as well. So we could have nightly builds, for example. Now we want to add a stage. So let's click on that. I'm going to create an empty job, and we're going to give that a name. So in this one, let's say deploy to dev, and click on the jobs and the tasks. So what do we want to deploy to dev? So we'll click on add here. What is it that we're doing? We're doing an ARM template deployment. And if we click on that now, we can specify all the variables, all the information that it needs to deploy. So it's a resource group deployment. How are we going to connect? So we're not logging in manually, so it's all through Azure DevOps. So it's another service that's logging in, not us. So what we want to do is use our service connection. So we can see our connection is now there. So we can use that connection now. And that will then go and check what subscriptions it can see. We've only given it access to that one. And the same, your users will see the same thing. They'll only get access, and they'll only be able to see the areas that you've provided access to. And you can only see 2 resource groups in here, for example. So let's do dev there. In this one, we're going to overwrite it with a parameter file anyway, so let's just put something in. Okay, and so it's going to be template deployment. So which template do we want to use? We'll have a look at these as well. So what we're going to do is we'll deploy a SQL Server with a database here. And we've also got some parameter files. So what we'll do is, in this case, we'll use the dev parameter file, which is this guy here. Click on that. Okay, we'll give this a name, deploy to dev. Okay, and we'll save that. Let's give that a save. Okay, now we've got that set up. We'll click on create release. So that's just going to do a simple deployment of a database and a server to our dev resource group. We'll just click OK on that one. And then what we can do, we can click on this to see the progress of it, and we can click on the logs button here to see what's happening exactly. So you can see this is the the platform hosted machine. So it'll spin up a machine. It's got all the PowerShell modules, etc. It will use that service principal and then try and log on and deploy your resources. In this case, it's complaining about invalid characters for us. If we click into it, we'll see the full error log here. Build. So let's just go and check that out. I'll just go check that out first, and I'll pause it while I do that. So it's actually complaining about this deployment name. I forgot to not add spaces to that, so let's just try that again. Go to release 2 and then see what happens now. Logs. Okay, we should now see that in our resource groups. If we click on that, yeah, cool. We can see that deploying now. So it's deploying to dev. So it's the same as we saw last time with the PowerShell, but this time we're doing it through Azure DevOps. Just check this deployment, so we can see it succeeded there, and we should see our resources. Great, so we can see our server there and a database as well. So what we'll do is we'll try and deploy to our production resource group as well. So if we go back to the DevOps, we can see all that's passed in green there. And what we'll do is we'll edit this release now. Just click on edit pipeline there. So what we can do in here, let's take a copy of this one. So we can just simply clone that. Let's give it a different name. So we'll deploy to prod in this one, deploy to production. Okay, and then let's look at the triggers for that as well. So the triggers, it will complete after the previous stage. And what we can also do is set an approval. Okay, so we can set it to manual as well. But let's add a gate to it. So we'll put an approval gate. So we click on that again. We can do can select on pre-approval. Pre-deployment approvals. Let's click on that, and let's say we want to send an email to somebody to approve it, so that we deploy to development, somebody checks it, and then only then if that gets approved, we'll continue with the production deployment. So let's do that, and then let's check the tasks in here. So we probably, because we cloned it, we want to change some of the parameters. So in this time we want to deploy it to our production resource group. And we don't want to use our development environment. We want to use our production parameter file there. So let's just leave it for that for now. Let's just change the deployment name and save that. Okay, now we won't create a release just yet. What we'll do is, if we take a look at the pipeline settings here, if we go all the way out to here. So when we set up this release, we selected continuous deployment as the trigger, so we'll take a look at that next. You can trigger the pipeline as well by making a change. So if we look at the prod one, we actually created a separate key vault secret actually, so let's just check that value. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, you'd create this in a completely separate key vault or production one, but in this case we've just created two different keys. So the password for prod is that. So what we'll just replace that. I'll do Control S to save it, and then we'll see we've got a push to go ahead there. I'll just stage that and then add it prod password. Click that one, and then we'll do a sync. So it's going to do and push my changes up to Azure DevOps, and then what that should do is it'll automatically go and kick off a release. Yeah, we can see it there. Now it's kicked it off. So you can see that's the continuous deployment part. So we've made a change to the code, committed it, and it'll automatically deploy it. Okay, so now it's going to do the dev deployment again. I'll go and check that. I'll just open my mailbox up as well, so we should get an approval email. Yeah, I can see the mails just arrived. I'll just open it up so you can see. So I've got a deployment to production is waiting for approval. So if I click on that, it will open up Azure DevOps under my account. So I can see that, and I can see release 3 has been kicked off, and there's a job there waiting. So if I just click on release 3, I'll see, okay, it's waiting for approval by me. So yeah, I could go and check if this has worked okay, everything's fine there. And I could just click the approve button here. I could add some comments. I could even reject it and put some comments, no, go and fix this or whatever, to the dev team, and then just click on approve. And then that will go away and then do the next part of the release stage. So if I just close that and go back to our training user. Let's just go back to release 3. You can see the deploy to production is starting now. Oh, it's queued up. We'll come back to that once it's finished. Okay, so that succeeded. Let's go take a look in the portal and look in the prod. Okay, so here we can see our SQL Server object, our production one, so that's the server, and then we've got our database here, also our production database there. So the final thing I wanted to show is just overwriting your parameter files using a variable. So if we just go back to our release, we've gone to our pipeline. So we go to releases, see our pipeline here. Let's edit that. Let's just create another copy. Let's create a staging copy in this case. Now, first of all, let's just rename that to deploy to staging. We'll save that there for now, and then if I click on this part here, so the pre-deployment conditions, what do I want it, how do I want it to behave, when, so do I want it to deploy after the dev piece, or I could even just do after release, so we can just move it into parallel. So once a code has been updated, it will then go and do both of these tasks. It won't wait for the other one, for example. Other things we can do, or just show you maybe useful for you, is the artifact filters, for example. So you could say if somebody just does a code change in this repo, but I say if I had further branches, I could create a different step, a different stage just for that specific branch as well. We won't bother with the approvals or anything for this one as well. So if we just go and edit this one, so we look at the tasks, and then let's just keep it in the resource group, the dev resource group as we had before, because that's the one that's got permissions for now. We'll keep the same template file as well, but what we'll do in this case, we'll overwrite some of those parameters. So if we click on that, we'll see the parameters that have been passed in through the parameter file, and in this case we could just say okay for this one, and then we'll see, okay, these are all been picked up, but let's just say we want to keep everything, but just do the environment code, for example. Let's just call that STG. If we just create release now, click create, and that should go off and kick it off for us. So we can see they're all queued up here. I'll just pause it for a second. Hopefully it's okay. Oh, we can see the if I just drill into that staging one, there's already apparently a server with that name. So what we'll do, we'll just cancel this one and go back to our tasks and make an edit. Let's just call that, I'll give it a different name. Edit that release. Just click on the blue one. Just kick it off again. I'll just go and check in our resource group, and we can see it's deploying there. Just check the inputs and stuff. Yeah, we can see all the inputs. So you can see our environment code is STG, and I just put some random characters in there in this case. Okay, the staging one looks to be complete. Go to the resource group. There's our staging server and staging database as well there. So thanks for watching our final part 4 of our little course on infrastructure as code using Azure DevOps. In this section we looked at the service connections, automatic versus manual, and the kind of permissions that are required for our service principal and our Key Vault. And then we looked at setup stages and tasks of a release pipeline, and a demo of continuous deployment and approvals, and also overwriting our parameters. For those that are on the ball, you might have noticed that we gave it contributor access, our service principal. In this case, because we're only deploying a SQL Server, we could have even given it even lower access to like SQL Server contributor, for example. But yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully it was useful and maybe you learnt something. If you think it's useful, like, subscribe so we know whether or not to do any more of these little courses. Thanks again for watching.